Most artists think getting the proportions right is the key to a great portrait, but even then it can still look flat and lifeless. After 25 years of drawing and 17 years of tattooing, I've learned exactly what makes a portrait stand out. So I'm going to share with you the 6 portrait tips that have transformed my students' work so you can do the same. Okay, tip number 1. I used the grid method and I focused on hyperrealism for 20 years, and I thought the more realistic the portrait, the better the drawing was. I viewed details as the highest form of currency, but it wasn't until I transitioned to freehand and more expressive work that I realized that it's actually not. Detail should be motivated. Just because you can add detail doesn't mean you should. Now this is subjective of course, but some of the best artists in the world use minimal detail. My favorite artists like Nathan Fawkes and John Sargent, they use detail very sparingly and they focus on the tonal relationships to create the likeness, not detail. This is one of my favorite pieces I've ever done because there's barely anything in it. I have some soft value shapes and suggest a few varied tones, that's pretty much it. But that brings the portrait to life. There's literally no detail. Having as much detail as possible isn't unique. I'm sorry, I did it for 20 years. Comparing a hyperrealism portrait to another hyperrealism portrait, you can't tell them apart. Now this doesn't make them any less impressive because you still need a ton of experience and focus to be able to create them. But I do find them less interesting in comparison. It's like going to a fashion show and everyone basically wearing the same outfit. No one's going to be standing out. Nathan Fawkes' work is so beautiful because it invites you, the viewer, to participate. It's visually compelling and it leads your eye through and around the piece. It takes you on a journey. A super detailed piece is impressive and it genuinely makes you go, wow, that's amazing, that actually looks like a photo. But an expressive piece makes you see something lifelike, but from a completely unique perspective. In your next piece, ask yourself, does this detail help tell the story, or is it just filling space? Start easy, pick an area you want to focus on like the features and see if you can imply the surrounding areas such as the hair. That contrast alone will already make your art more interesting. Okay, tip number 2. Every time I saw an artist's work that I loved, I think to myself, what materials are they using? Maybe they're using something which is the secret that I don't have. So I would rush out, I'd buy the same equipment as them, and more often than not, I would just introduce more problems. And my work didn't get better, it just looked different. Fundamentals are way more important than the materials. My most asked question still today is, what paper do I use? Using different equipment doesn't improve your skill set of the fundamentals. Now I'm not saying equipment isn't important because it definitely is. You can get different paper which will give you smoother shading or pencils that will give you darker blacks, but they don't give you better proportions or the understanding on how to capture likeness. Different materials doesn't mean better drawings. It's not what's in your hand, it's what's in your head. Picture this. Compare a beginner who has access to all of the best equipment in the world against a professional who draws on a napkin. Who's going to have a better drawing? I'm exaggerating obviously, but you understand my point. The fastest way to improve isn't by buying more materials, it's by mastering the basics, proportions, values, and composition. Next time you're inspired by someone's work, ask them about their process, not just their equipment. Focus on the fundamentals and the materials will start to work for you, not the other way around. Okay, tip 3. Have you ever finished a portrait that you're genuinely proud of and then just stare at the empty background, almost apprehensive about what you're going to do with it? I used to do this all the time. I would be so focused on getting the portrait right that I wouldn't even consider the background, and then I would just be stuck. The background is just as important as the portrait. Here's the issue. If you leave the background until the end, you can end up with a portrait that feels disconnected and a decision to make that could ruin what you've already done. So how do you avoid this awkward stage where it feels like you're kind of just gluing these two separate things together? Well, let me show you. Because you've been judging all of your tonal shades of the portrait against the paper, when you then add the tones of the background in, suddenly the whole balance of the portrait shifts, and sometimes in a way that just doesn't work. Here's the secret. Instead of viewing the drawing as two separate pieces, the portrait and the background, you want to view it as just one piece, the artwork. By building in the background at the same time as building in the portrait, you're able to create the artwork in unison, balancing the contrast and readability of the whole piece. they complement each other. It's like adding salt and vinegar or ketchup to your chips, they just work together. And you don't have to have a really expressive background either. You could have something a lot more soft and simple, or you could have something really minimal. The goal is to complement the drawing, not take away from it. So what does this mean for you? Well, next time you start a portrait, lightly blocking your background at the same time. Think about how the two parts can work together to complete a unified piece. It's a small shift, but it makes such a huge difference. Okay, tip number 4. Now obviously there's an abundance of references online that you can use, which are great for practicing. But what separates the pros is that they take their own photos. Sounds daunting, I know, but it's actually very simple to do. Let me show you. When I first thought about taking my own references, I fell into this massive hole just overthinking everything, thinking, right, I need to learn about cameras, lenses, lighting, settings, I need a model. And because I was using references like these that I found online, I thought that was the standard that I needed to be at. It felt like a lot. And after learning about cameras and lighting and spending thousands of pounds on equipment, I can tell you for a fact, you only need to know 3 simple things. First, you need a camera, obviously. Good news is most people have smartphones and the cameras on them are more than suitable for what we need. That's your only expense, which you probably already have. Second is you need a model. Grab a friend or a family member. All of these references are just of my friends who have never done a shoot before. It's awkward, it's weird, it's funny, but you don't need your friend to create this blue steel look to take a good portrait. A lot of my references just have a blank face. When you draw them, it translates completely differently, so don't worry if they look a little plain in the face. Third is lighting. Here's the real secret. You don't need fancy lights or a studio. I've got some of my favorite shots and drawings just by using the sun. And luckily, you only need to know one simple thing when shooting outside. Avoid midday sun. That's it. Because otherwise you'll end up with shots like this. Shoot in the late afternoon or early evening when the sun is lower. The light is softer and it's in a better position to take better portraits. Or you can shoot on an overcast day. The clouds act as a natural softbox, giving you soft light every single time. It's the great thing about England, it's always cloudy. So next time you need a reference, grab your phone, grab your mate and head outside. Get weird, get awkward and just have some fun. No fancy gear required. Just good sunlight and a bit of creativity and some clouds. Okay, tip number 5. Have you ever noticed how some portraits have a real nice classical inviting look to them and others just feel more interesting? The secret is in your textures and edges. So for instance, if you're drawing a woman or a child and you want to capture something light and innocent, then soft edges and smooth blending gives a real ethereal feel to it. Or if you want something that has a bit more of a dynamic look, then sharper edges and textures can give you something quite interesting. It's similar if I were to change the temperature of this shot. I can go really cool with it, making it feel dark and moody, or I can give it a more warm look, making it feel natural and inviting. Same shot, but completely different feeling. So how can you do this? Next time you draw, think about the feeling that you want to portray. Try softening the edges around the cheeks or the hair for a dreamy look, or sharpening the side of the face or the features for more impact. Controlling your edges and textures lets you control the feeling of your artwork. Okay, tip number 6. This is something that took me years to fully understand. So this is really important if you want to avoid the same mistake I did. Why is it you can spend 12 hours on a portrait and still get something quite flat looking, while others can spend 3 hours on a portrait and have something with so much more life to it? Values over details. Now I'm not bashing on details, I promise you. I know I never really shine a good light on them, but details are great if they're used properly. But here's the secret of all secrets, which isn't a secret, it's just fact. Values create likeness, details don't. The biggest mistake I see artists make all the time is working the details far too early. And it makes sense, it genuinely does. It's totally normal thinking if you get down and dirty with the details that is what's going to make the portrait come to life. But here's the kicker. It couldn't be any more opposite. To really hammer this home, let me show you this. The reason why you instantly recognize who this is, even though you can't see the strands of her hair, you can't really see her eyes or the features, is because you can see the tonal shading, the lights, the darks, the values. This is what creates realism and the life of the person. The details just add focus. But if you don't have the correct tonal shades, you're just adding focus onto a flat, lifeless image. Details are the seasoning on your portrait. It's like if you're adding a nice creamy white sauce to a piece of raw chicken. It doesn't matter, the sauce isn't going to save it, you're still eating raw chicken. You need to cook it first, then add the flavor. It's the same with drawing. You need to cook the values first, then add the details. If your values are off, no amount of detail will ever save your portrait. So next time you draw, block in your tones first before you even think about the details. At first, it can feel intimidating. It's scary going darker without a sense of focus on the face. But once your values are more accurate, the likeness will just jump out, I promise you. It just happens magically. Only then sprinkle in the details if you want. But how do you block in your tones first? By watching this video here.